or there's something missing there that they want, like a religious component to their child's education. So if we allow the government to follow behind a voucher over into that private choice, it's not going to be very long before we see the same things over here that cause them to leave that environment in the first place. Thank you.
We have been fans and supporters of public education, public teachers, retired teachers, and see one right there, probably more in the audience, ever since we were running. We were voted in when a gentleman who favored school vouchers was voted out. We are in the corner of public education because we believe it's the right place to be. I believe that public education is a bedrock, a foundation of our democracy. We have been against school vouchers, let me make that clear right up the front. Now, I have two nephews who have been homeschooled. Parents did that for religious reasons. The kids came out fine because the parents were very involved in that homeschool. But the taxpayer dollars that they paid needed to go to the public school, and they did. So against vouchers, if a parent wants to take their child and go to a private school, homeschool, video school, okay. But where I'm seeing the problem is these days with that is that the parents are not capable of competently teaching their children, or else they've gotten mad at the school over some reason, pulled their kid out of school, and stuck them in front of a video. Now that happens to some kids, maybe not a whole lot, but we have to be careful about that. So I think that's all I have to say on that subject. Thank you.
100% the money needs to stay with the school, not the kid, because it should be the parent's choice to put the kid wherever they would like to put it. You have really expensive private schools, you have cheap private schools, so it should be your choice. But I think that we need to bring back to our public schools more challenging courses like home ec, advanced ag classes, different kind of industries, because we're teaching our kids and we're sending them off to college and they're getting these big fancy liberal arts philosophy degrees, and then they're getting out and they have all this debt and they have no jobs. Our trades are lacking. Plumbers and welders and carpenters and all that are making all sorts of money. So we have to start back at the high school level and bring back more challenging deals. But the money needs to stay with the school, not the student. Thank you.
Speaking of schools, I've got two girls, 15 and 17. My 15-year-old is still trying to figure out what she wants to be and what kind of gets her excited at school. But she was very excited about science, especially whenever they do the projects, light things on fire and all that kind of good stuff. Well, she came home, she was really excited, but then one day she came home and she was bummed. She says, well, we can't do any more projects because we got to study for this test, and that's all we can learn about for the rest of the year is this test, right? So we know that we've got a ton of standardized testing in the state of Texas. So Representative Sheffield, I believe you're next. What can we do in the next legislative session? Where are we today with the number of standardized tests in the state of Texas? Is it effective, and would you support, what would your stance be in the next session in regards to either lessening or increasing standardized testing in the public school system?
We have way too much standardized testing in our public schools at this point. We have way too many teachers who feel forced to teach to the test because their job can rely on their students' test scores. That's wrong. We have way too many students who are getting anxious and nervous and fretful. I had one teacher tell me she even had a student who threw up on the test the day of the test because the student was so worried about the test. And then after the test, the students come to the teacher and say, "Teacher, did we test well enough for you? Are you going to be okay?" Now, that is wrong from the get-go. That is wrong from the get-go. Now, we need to have some accountability, but I believe that teachers know best how to teach their students. They know when to test, and they know how to test better. 1 minute left? Is that what you're saying? Okay. They know better how to teach and how to test. And we need our school administration to be in charge of the schools and the local school board to be running the schools. We have way too much regulation coming out of Austin from TEA. We just need to stop TEA completely, turn it into something that just gives materials and resources, but does not mandate any type of testing, okay? We can have some of the same tests like we had when we were in high school, achievement tests like that nature. They worked just fine then. I think they would work just fine now. And that would be one thing that could turn around our public schools more than anything else at this point. So, thank you.
Get rid of the standardized testing. It's just silly. You know, some of y'all have heard my speeches in the past, and the very first paragraph I have is for our kids, our grandkids, and our great-grandkids. And then later on in the speech, you hear a part about taking special interest money. Well, if you look at the way that the testing is done now, it's all about special interest. The company that's doing the test is paying the legislators to push this test through, and that's how come we have it. Just follow the dollar, but we have to remember that our education system is broken. The teachers make less, their retirement's less, everything. I mean, it's our kids are everything, y'all. I mean, every one of us in here have kids, grandkids, nephews, nieces. Katie's back there somewhere. The world, that's our next generation, y'all. Our kids. So we have to find a way to make it better for them, because if it's not for the kids, we don't have a future. Thank you.
I don't remember exactly how you phrased the question. But the bottom line is, nobody likes the STAR. Parents don't like it, taxpayers don't like it, teachers don't like it, kids don't like it. I have kids in the schools, they don't like it. So we know that it's not serving us well, but we keep going back to the same well over and over every session. So should we have some kind of measuring tool? Of course we should. I grew up under the TEAMS test and the TAWS test, but it wasn't like what we do now. I've talked to a lot of teachers in the last year, and some of them will talk about they spend 30 different days of the school year just preparing and doing worksheets and teaching how to take a test. And there's a significant difference as a parent watching my kid work on worksheets that teach her how to take a test versus mastering the content that she ought to be mastering in school. So we know that we need to do something different. We know that we are spending a lot of money on something that isn't efficiently and effectively teaching our kids. We also all know that it's a very profitable machine out there. So to bring about that change is going to take a lot of energy and movement from all of those stakeholders who don't like it. One legislator can't do it, but educators and parents and taxpayers together can. And I'm going to point out to you that all of these objections that a current representative has to this test have not been addressed by filing a single bill about it in 8 years to change it. Thank you.
You know, in a day and time when you've got liberal states passing abortion laws that says you can take the life of a born baby, you know, the day of birth, if you like, I'm glad that Texas is still holding the line. We did make some progress this last session when it came to abortion, but there's still plenty of room for improvement. So, Mr. Johnson, in the next legislative session, what would be your stance on abortion, and what would you personally like to get accomplished in regards to legislation on that topic?
Well, all y'all know, I tell the story that I'm adopted. My biological mother was 16 when she had me. I'm 51 years old. I was born in 1968. Being pregnant at 16 back then was not frowned upon. So I was one of three thoughts: abort, keep, or put up for adoption. I'm lucky to be here, y'all. at conception is life to me. It will always be that. There's no middle ground, there's no gray ground. If you're gonna conceive a baby, that's your baby. We will do everything that we can in our power to keep just to keep it going, because there again, our kids are our kids, and you're not gonna hurt our unborn babies. Thank you.
I am a unapologetic, strong, pro-life woman. I believe that a life begins at conception, and Texas is failing in the regard that we are not leading on this issue in this nation. And if Texas doesn't lead on it, who is going to? Now, some of the legislation that I would personally bring about would be a heartbeat bill. That would be one of my first priorities. Now, when I say that life begins at conception, I believe that, but I think that the first step to getting to the abolition of abortion is to bring about that heartbeat bill in Texas. We haven't made any effective progress in that direction, and we have to. There are plenty of other conservative representatives out there ready to work on that too. So it's not a single woman in an island. We just have to send in more authentic, true conservatives to the fight. I'll also tell you that I'm very proud to be endorsed in this election by Texas Right to Life, the strongest pro-life advocacy group in the state of Texas. I will also tell you that in the last 8 years, we have not had any representation that personally authors any legislation to advance that pro-life cause. In fact, in 2015, when House Bill 2510 came up, our representative voted with the Democrats against closing a late-term abortion loophole in Texas. A few years before that, in 2013, 12 different times, he voted with the Democrats trying to weaken and outright kill one of the strongest pieces of pro-life legislation in recent history. Not only can we do better, if we are serious about protecting innocent life, we have to do better. Thank you.
As a doctor, at one point in my career, I had delivered lots of babies into this world. There's nothing more joyous than watching new life come into this world. There's nothing more tragic than seeing when tough decisions have to be made. I am endorsed by 2 of the 3 pro-life groups in Austin. And this past session, Governor Abbott was looking for someone to co-author his most pro-life priority bill. And I was proud to be a joint author. And if you look at some of our flyers, you'll see the picture of Governor Abbott signing that bill and myself standing at his shoulder on one of his strongest pro-life bills of the session. Now, there's one problem with Texas Right to Life, medically speaking. And the reason they don't like me. When it comes to the issue of a woman whose pregnancy is harming her life, as a doctor, I believe that woman should have the right to make the decision as to her treatment. She can choose to terminate the pregnancy and live, or to take her chances. Now, as a doctor, that comes down to a decision by the patient. That's the disagreement I have with Texas Right to Life. That's the reason they never endorsed us. But we are endorsed by 2 of the 3 pro-life groups down there. This heartbeat bill has failed in other states and been declared unconstitutional. That's why it was offered in Texas. It went nowhere. We had seen what had happened to it in other states. So if you have any further questions about this issue, I'd like you to please come up and talk to me after this meeting. Thank you.
One of our submissions was on a different topic. We're going to switch topics to Child Protective Services, CPS, all right? And whoever submitted this wasn't a big fan, because I got 3 paragraphs that I'm going to shrink down for y'all. But the overall attitude was that CPS has too much authority, too much ability to come in, swipe away children, and they don't feel like it's under the same process of probable cause and what have you for an arrest warrant to be created. So the question is, Are you familiar with the CPS system today, and do you feel like they have enough authority as is, and or would you change anything about the way that they handle their operations?
Yes.
Well, I don't have any personal experience, familiarity with it in recent history. Once upon a time, I was appointed, I'm an attorney, and once upon a time I was appointed to work on a case involving them. But I will tell you, I visited with a number of people in the last year, and there have been foster parents that have shared some experiences that they've had with their side of the process. I can't tell you that I've come to the door of any parents who have been involved in it, but I do see some of those news stories out there. And obviously it's a delicate issue because if you have a child in a dangerous situation, you want naturally to protect that child. But we also have due process rights. And we don't want the government inserting themselves unnecessarily in the rights of parents within the home. So I err on the side of the parent and the family and not the government inserting itself into that dynamic. So I do think that in the instances where a law enforcement officer or someone has to intervene in that circumstance, there ought to be a rapid appearance before a court to make a determination on what is the right thing and not a delayed, dragged out process that extends the period of time where that child is not with the family. We've seen some pretty egregious situations in the news just in the last year where children have been wrongfully removed from home. And that's all I have. Thank you.
I have some very, how's this? I have some very strong feelings about Child Protective Services. On one hand, they are vastly underfunded and they are vastly understaffed. If they had better funding and more staff, they could do a better job. Now, like every organization in Austin, they have some people working for them that aren't doing the job correctly and aren't doing the job well. Now, I'm thinking of a kid I saw a couple of weeks ago, 3 years old, in my clinic, running around, smiling, happy, couldn't speak a word. CPS had brought him in, put him in foster care, and they bring him to us to do the initial exam. What kind of trauma has that child gone through that at 3 years of age, they can't speak a word? We need to protect our children. They're some of our most innocent people. They need our protection from parents who don't care. We can't pass a law to make parents care for their kids, for those who don't care. And I've seen those parents, I've had to deal with them, and I'm going to err, when possible, with full legal rights to the parents, but I want to make sure that that kid is safe and well cared for and protected. We should do that as a Christian society. Thank you.
I actually know a little bit about this. My mother worked for the Rainbow Room for CPS in Steve Mill, Texas. And y'all unfamiliar with what the Rainbow Room is? The Rainbow Room is full of diapers and food and toys and just the necessities for kids. And when the CPS would go out to these places and take the children, sometimes they would take them just with the diapers they had on. Sometimes, she told a story one time that they went to pick up a child that had the same diaper on for they expected about a week. They had to take the baby naked. So I'm with Dr. Sheffield that we have to protect our kids, no matter what. We can't have our parents, just like Dr. Sheffield said, you cannot make the parents love and take care of their kids. So yes, we have to do whatever we can to get more funding to them, to do the things because if we don't, our kids are, we gotta take care of our kids. But yes, thank you.
I like that. You can't legislate good parenting, right? You can't fix, well, I'm not gonna say that. Anyway, last question before we get into closing statements. Representative Sheffield, how many in here either work for or have family that do work for TDCJ? Really? All that traffic on 116, we only got it. Anyway, you could be working full-time out there and still qualify for food stamps. Think about that. Putting your life on the line, working around some shady characters, you can be working full-time and you can still qualify for food stamps. Well, the Texas legislative body actually has authority over that, has influence over that process. So in the next legislative session, Representative Sheffield, this is for you. What would you do to, or have done, in order to change that circumstance with our folks that are working out there at the prisons?
I'm able to keep a close thumb on what's happening at TDCJ because a lot of those folks who wear the gray come through my clinic. We get to discuss issues every week. What's going on that's right, what's going on that's wrong. Now let's put it into one sentence, what these people do. These correctional officers in the gray work every day in 100-degree heat, shoulder to shoulder, with people who would like to kill them. Think about that. That kind of atmosphere. And we're paying them such a paltry sum. What I do is every time I sit on appropriations committee, we write the budget. Every time that comes through, I walk over to the people in charge and said, what are you doing for TDCJ? What are you doing for the correctional officers? What are you doing for the non-correctional officers also? And, 1 minute, okay. When I sat on the corrections committee, we brought the committee up to TDCJ and had them walk through a unit. And for a lot of them, it was a very eye-opening experience. What I want to do next time is bring that committee up here, have them put on the uniform of the guards, and go through just like every other guard does, and then see what kind of reception they get. So we need more funding. We just need more funding. You got to pay what it takes to get the best. You got to pay what it takes to keep the best, and then we will have a much better start on the road to doing better for our TDCJ employees. I'm very proud that I've had their endorsement, and I was speaking to a group of them the other night because I understand their situation probably better, mainly because I've been exposed to it for 27 years now. Thank you.
Parker, will you repeat the question, please?
Yes, sir. Today we've got folks working at TDCJ that can be working full-time and still qualify for food stamps. So in the next legislative session, what would you do to influence the overall management of the system in order to change that situation?
Well, this kind of goes back to the school teachers. Dr. Sheffield's right. They're our guards, our PDs are sitting right by the people that want to kill them, and we pay them pennies, just like our teachers. Something that I have done in this campaign, I have been to several of the jails through our county. Mr. Williams gave me a tour of the Coryell County Sheriff's Department jail. It scared me to death. When I was a kid, around junior high, we took a field trip to our local jail there in Nevada County, and it had a lasting impact on me. I was 51 years old, and it made a lasting impact on me to get that tour. I think that we need to take the kids back to the jails, scare them, to help keep the kids out. But back to the guards, we have to get more funding because where our prisons are overcrowded, they're working hours. It's just silly, and that's what all this is, y'all. It's just silly. We've lost common sense in our government, so we have to take it back and do the right thing for the people. Simple as that. Thank you.
So pay is always always a component, and obviously that's a big component if you've got people who are at the point where they need assistance just to buy groceries. But that's not necessarily the only thing that we need to do is to increase wages. When we have a situation that a lot of TDCJ employees that I've talked to have told me that there's severe understaffing involved. So how do you in a labor market that's already kind of tight, where we have a lot of jobs available and we don't always have the workers for them, how do you recruit people, even if you raise the wages, to a job that is riskier or is harder to do at the same pay as some other place in town? Well, some of those are softer things, being willing to invest in the training of those individuals so that they can create other opportunities for themselves down a career ladder. Making sure that they have appropriate equipment, that they feel safe when they are physically in that facility is an important component of that. And just to have the respect as a professional within the industry, because some of them have voiced concerns before that while they're working in a very difficult environment, they feel kind of lesser than some of our other law enforcement officers. And so those are some of the soft issues to address, but obviously there is a funding and a budgetary issue that's right there up at the top too. Thank you.
Thank you very much for answering these questions this evening and giving us a chance to get to know more about each of you. We'll begin our closing statements tonight. Mr. Johnson will go first, JD, and then Shelby. 3 minutes, by the way. Thank you. You've been doing a great job. Bye.
Once again, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming tonight. I want to start out by saying that I'm never going to be the smartest person in the room. I want to learn. I'm a knowledge junkie. I love to learn. So I'm going to surround myself with people that I will learn from. If I understand right, there were 7,000 bills that were introduced, written. Nobody can understand all the bills. I'm not the most polished speaker up here. We have an attorney, we have a doctor, and they're good at it. They're good at speaking up here. But as I was saying earlier, it's been a rough day. I'm riding a little bit. But I want each and every one of you to study the candidates. Look at their histories. Look between the lines. Look between the glam and the well-spoken. Because a lot of it's bull. You see a 30-second glamour shot, and that's all. But this is the most important election of our time. I'm your normal guy. I'm one of y'all. I'm not supposed to be up here running for office. But just as our President Donald Trump, he wasn't either. He's a businessman. But we have so much corruption from the local to the state